The Georgia sun beat down mercilessly on Peachtree Street as the afternoon rush hour began to build. Atlanta's downtown core buzzed with its usual energy. Business people clutching coffee cups, tourists snapping photos, and street vendors calling out their daily specials. The humid air carried the mixed scents of food trucks and car exhaust, creating that distinctly urban summer atmosphere that anyone who's spent time in the South knows well. Shaquille O'Neal stepped out of his black SUV, his towering 7.1 frame immediately drawing attention from passers-by. Even in retirement, Shaq commanded respect and admiration wherever he went. Today, he was dressed casually in a simple white polo and dark jeans, but his presence was anything but ordinary. He had just finished a business meeting about his latest restaurant venture and was heading to grab lunch before his next appointment. As he walked down the sidewalk, his security detail keeping a respectful distance, Shaq noticed the usual crowd beginning to form. People pulled out their phones, whispering excitedly to their companions. He smiled and waved, used to the attention but always gracious about it. Shaq, can we get a picture?" called out a young woman with her friends. "Of course, darling," he replied in his distinctive deep voice, stopping to pose with the group. His genuine smile and warm demeanor made everyone feel at ease. But as the small crowd dispersed and Shaq continued walking, something caught his eye. That made him pause mid-stride. About 30 feet ahead, sitting on the steps of an old brick building, was a boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. The child was thin, wearing a faded Atlanta Hawks t-shirt that was too big for him and jeans with holes at the knees. But what stopped Shaq in his tracks wasn't the boy's worn clothing. It was his feet. The boy was completely barefoot. The concrete sidewalk radiated heat from the blazing sun, and Shaq could see other pedestrians, carefully stepping around the scorching pavement. Yet here was this child, sitting with his bare feet pressed against the burning concrete, seemingly oblivious to the discomfort. Shaq's security team noticed him slow down and looked in the direction of his gaze. The boy was focused on something in his hands, an old smartphone with a cracked screen. His dark hair was unkempt, and there was a weariness in his posture that seemed far too mature for someone so young. "You see that kid?" Shaq murmured, to his security chief, Marcus, who had been with him for years. Marcus nodded, his expression growing serious. "Yeah, I see him. Want me to check it out?" "No," Shaq said quietly, his voice taking on a thoughtful tone. "Let me handle this." The giant of a man began walking slowly toward the boy, his businessman's instincts telling him that something wasn't quite right about the situation. As he got closer, he could see the child's feet were dirty and showed signs of having been without shoes for some time. The soles were tough and calloused, but there were also small cuts and scrapes that told a story of hardship. The boy looked up as Shaq's shadow fell across him, his eyes widening in recognition, but showing none of the excitement that typically accompanied such encounters. Instead, there was caution, the kind of wariness that comes from experience with disappointment. "Hey there, young man," Shaq said gently, crouching down to the boy's level, which still left him towering over the child. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, glancing around nervously. "Marcus," he finally answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus, that's a strong name. Same as my friend over there," Shaq said, gesturing toward his security chief. "I'm Shaq. You know who I am?" The boy nodded slowly. "You played basketball. My dad used to watch you on TV." "Used to?" Shaq picked up on the past tense immediately. Marcus, the boy, looked down at his phone, the screen flickering with a low battery. Warning. He's not around anymore." The weight of those words hung in the hot Atlanta air. Shaq felt his heart constrict as he recognized the pain behind the simple statement. He'd grown up without his biological father and knew the ache that absence could create. "Where's your mom, Marcus?" Shaq asked gently. "She's at work. She works 2 jobs," the boy replied, still not making full eye contact. "I wait here until she picks me up, usually around 6. Shaq glanced at his watch. It was barely 2 p.m. 4 hours was a long time for any child to sit alone on a city street, especially barefoot on burning concrete. "Marcus," Shaq said, his voice taking on the gentle but firm tone he used with his own children. "Where are your shoes, son?" The question seemed to hit the boy like a physical blow. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment Shaq thought he might cry. But Marcus just shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Don't need 'em," he mumbled. But Shaq had seen enough of the world to recognize pride disguising necessity. He'd been there himself, growing up in a single-parent household where every dollar mattered. The boy's brave face couldn't hide the truth. He didn't have shoes because his family couldn't afford them. As pedestrians continued to walk by, most barely glancing at the barefoot child, Shaq made a decision that would change everything. "Mind if I sit with you for a minute?" Shaq asked, gesturing to the concrete steps. Marcus shrugged again, scooting over to make room, though Shaq's massive frame took up most of the available space. The basketball legend settled down with a slight grunt, his knees nearly touching his chest even while sitting. "You know," Shaq began, his voice taking on a conversational tone, "I used to sit on steps like these when I was about your age." Marcus glanced up, curiosity flickering in his eyes despite his guarded demeanor. "Really? Really? My mom worked hard to take care of me and my brothers and sisters. Sometimes I'd wait for her after school, just like you're waiting now." Shaq's voice carried the weight of genuine memory. "There were times when things were tight, when we had to choose between different things we needed." The boy's phone screen went dark, the battery finally dying. He stared at the blank screen with disappointment that was painful to witness. "That how you talk to your mom?" Shaq asked, nodding toward the phone. "Yeah. She gave it to me so I could text her if anything happened while I'm waiting. But the battery don't last long, and we can't afford to replace it." Marcus's voice was matter-of-fact, but Shaq could hear the frustration underneath. A woman walking by with her young daughter noticed Shaq and started to approach for a photo, but something in his posture, the way he was completely focused on Marcus, made her reconsider. She quietly ushered her child past, respecting the obvious gravity of the moment. "How old are you, Marcus?" Shaq asked. 10? Well, I'll be 10 next month." 9 years old and sitting alone on city streets for hours at a time. Shaq felt his protective instincts kick into high gear. "What grade you in?" "Fourth." "Well, I'm supposed to be starting 4th grade when school starts up again." Marcus kicked his bare feet against the concrete, and Shaq winced internally at the scraping sound. "You like school?" For the first time, Marcus's face brightened slightly. "Yeah, I do. I like reading. And math. My teacher, Mrs. Johnson, she says I'm real smart." "I bet you are," Shaq said with a genuine smile. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" "I want to be an engineer. Like, the kind that builds bridges and buildings. I like figuring out how things work and how to make them better." The passion in the boy's voice was unmistakable. "That's amazing, Marcus. Engineers are incredibly important. They build the world we live in." Shaq paused, then asked carefully, "But school can be tough sometimes, right? Especially when other kids have things you don't?" Marcus's expression shuddered again. He nodded almost imperceptibly. "The other kids, they notice stuff," he said quietly. "Like when I don't have new school supplies, or when my clothes are too big, or when you don't have shoes," Shaq finished gently. Marcus nodded, his eyes filling with tears he was trying hard not to shed. "The gym teacher said I can't participate in PE anymore without proper shoes. Says it's not safe. And some of the kids, they call me names." Shaq felt anger rising in his chest, not at the children who were just being children, but at a system that allowed a bright, ambitious kid like Marcus to suffer in silence. "What does your mom say about all this?" "I don't tell her," Marcus said quickly. "She's already working so hard. Mrs. Rodriguez at the corner store, she lets Mom work there in the mornings, and then she cleans offices at night. She's tired all the time. I don't want to make her worry more." The maturity in the boy's voice was heartbreaking. At 9 years old, Marcus was already trying to protect his mother from additional stress, shouldering burdens that no child should have to carry. "Your mom sounds like an amazing woman," Shaq said. "But you know what? Sometimes parents want to know when their kids are struggling. It's not about making them worry. It's about letting them love you and figure out solutions together." Marcus considered this, then shook his head. She already knows about the shoes. We've talked about it. She said maybe by Christmas. Christmas was still 4 months away. The thought of this boy going shoeless through the remainder of summer, all of fall, and into winter, made Shaq's decision crystal clear. Marcus, what size shoes do you wear? The boy looked confused by the question. I don't know. It's been a while since I had any. Shaq stood up, his full height casting a long shadow across the steps. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to Marcus, his security. Chief, I need you to do me a favor, he said to the boy. I need you to trust me for about 30 minutes. Can you do that? Marcus looked uncertain. I'm not supposed to go anywhere with strangers. Smart rule. Your mom taught you well, Shaq approved. How about this? See that Foot Locker across the street? You can see it from right here, right? Marcus nodded, following Shaq's gaze to the athletic shoe store. I'm going to go over there, and you're going to watch me the whole time. I'll wave at you from the window so you know I'm still there. And when I come back, I'm going to have something for you. Deal? Why? Marcus asked, the question that had been building since their conversation began. Why do you care about me? You don't even know me. Shaq knelt down again, bringing himself as close to eye level with Marcus as his height would allow. Because once upon a time, I was a kid who needed someone to care. And because you remind me that sometimes the smallest gestures can change everything. And because engineers who build bridges and buildings, the world needs more of those. He paused, then added with absolute sincerity, and because every kid deserves to feel like they matter. Shaq stood up and began walking toward the crosswalk, Marcus watching intently from his perch on the steps. True to his word, when Shaq reached the Foot Locker, he turned and waved at the boy, who tentatively waved back. Inside the store, the teenage employees did double takes as the basketball legend entered. The manager, a woman in her 30s named Sarah, approached with barely contained excitement. Mr. O'Neill, this is such an honor. Can I help you with anything? Actually, yes, Shaq said, his tone serious. I need your help with something important. See that boy across the street on the steps? Sarah followed his gaze and spotted Marcus, still sitting where Shaq had left him. I need shoes for him. Good shoes. The best you have in his size. Shaq paused, then continued. But I also need socks, and I'm thinking some clothes too. He's about 9, 10 years old. Of course. What size is he? That's the thing, I don't know. He hasn't had shoes in a while. Shaq's voice carried a weight that made Sarah's expression grow serious. I'm going to bring him over, but I want to make this as easy and comfortable for him as possible. Can you help me with that? Sarah nodded immediately. Absolutely. Let me get my measuring equipment ready, and I'll have my team pull some options. In a few different sizes. One more thing, Shaq said, pulling out his credit card. Whatever this costs, that's not important. What's important is that kid feels good about himself when he walks out of here. Shaq headed back across the street, where Marcus was still waiting, his eyes tracking every movement. Okay, Marcus, remember what I said about trusting me? The boy nodded. I want you to come with me to that store. We're going to get you some shoes. Marcus's eyes widened. I can't. I don't have any money. Did I ask you for money? No, but nothing. Sometimes people do nice things just because they can, just because it's right. Shaq extended his massive hand toward the boy. Come on. Marcus hesitated for a long moment, then slowly reached out and took Shaq's hand. His small fingers barely wrapped around two of Shaq's, but the connection was firm. They crossed the street together, Marcus padding along on bare feet while Shaq shortened his stride to match the boy's pace. Several passers-by noticed the unusual pair, the giant basketball legend and the small barefoot child. But something about their interaction kept most people from intruding. Inside the Foot Locker, Sarah had prepared a small area with a chair and measuring tools. The teenage employees were trying to look busy while stealing glances at the unfolding scene. Marcus, this is Sarah, Shaq said. She's going to help us find you the perfect shoes. Hi, Marcus, Sarah said warmly, crouching down to the boy's level. Why don't you have a seat right here, and we'll figure out what size you need. Marcus looked overwhelmed as he sat in the chair. When Sarah gently placed his foot on the measuring device, his eyes filled with tears. "These feet have been through a lot," Sarah said gently, noting the calluses and small wounds. "But we're going to take good care of them now." "Size 4, she announced after measuring both feet. "And I think we should start with some good socks." She handed Marcus a package of athletic socks, and he held them like they were made of gold. "Now," Sarah continued, "let's talk shoes. What kind do you like? Basketball shoes like Shaq used to wear? Running shoes? Something for school?" Marcus looked at Shaq uncertainly. "I don't know. I just need shoes." "How about we get you a few different pairs?" Shaq suggested. "School shoes, play shoes, maybe some sneakers? A few pairs?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. Shaq knelt down beside the chair. "Marcus, I want you to listen to me carefully. You are smart, you are kind, and you deserve good things. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Getting you shoes isn't charity. It's an investment in your future. Because I believe you're going to build some amazing bridges and buildings someday." Sarah brought over several boxes of shoes in size 4. Basketball shoes, running shoes, casual sneakers, and a pair of dress shoes. Marcus stared at them in disbelief. "Try them on," Shaq encouraged. "Let's see how they feel." With shaking hands, Marcus put on the socks. The first socks he'd worn in months. Then he slipped his feet into a pair of Nike basketball shoes. The moment his feet were fully enclosed, he broke down crying. "They're so comfortable," he sobbed. "I forgot what it felt like." Every person in the store, employees and customers alike, had stopped what they were doing to watch. There wasn't a dry eye in the place. Shaq put his large hand on Marcus's shoulder. "How do they feel when you walk?" Marcus stood up and took a few tentative steps, then a few more. A smile spread across his face. The first genuine smile Shaq had seen from him. "They feel perfect." "Good. We'll take all of them," Shaq told Sarah. "All of them?" Marcus asked in disbelief. "All of them. Plus some socks and—" Shaq looked around the store. "How about some clothes too? Some school clothes, some play clothes?" For the next hour, Sarah and her team helped Marcus pick out several outfits, more socks and underwear, and all the shoes they'd selected. Marcus tried everything on, his confidence growing with each item. Other customers in the store began to realize what was happening. Instead of being annoyed by the delay, many were moved to tears. A few asked if they could contribute to help other children, and by the end of the shopping session, the store had started an impromptu donation drive. As they prepared to leave, Marcus, wearing his new basketball shoes and carrying several bags of clothes and shoes, he turned to Shaq. "Why did you do this for me?" he asked again. Shaq thought for a moment before answering. "Because every child deserves to start each day feeling good about themselves. Because shoes are just the beginning. Confidence is what really matters. And because I have a feeling you're going to do great things with your life, and I wanted to be a small part of that journey." But as they prepared to head back across the street, Shaq realized their time together was far from over. The real impact of this moment was just beginning to unfold. As they walked back toward the steps where they'd first met, Marcus moved differently. His posture was straighter, his steps more confident. The simple act of having shoes had transformed not just his appearance, but his entire demeanor. "What time did you say your mom picks you up?" Shaq asked. "Around 6, Marcus replied, then checked his dead phone. "But I can't tell time now." Shaq pulled out his own phone. "It's 4:30. Want to call her and let her know you're okay? She might worry if she can't reach you. You'd let me use your phone?" "Of course." Marcus dialed his mother's number with careful precision. After a few rings, a woman's voice answered, speaking in Spanish before switching to English. "Marcus? Whose phone is this? Are you okay?" "Mom, I'm fine. I'm with—" Marcus looked at Shaq uncertainly. "Let me talk to her," Shaq said gently, taking the phone. "Ma'am, my name is Shaquille O'Neal. Your son is safe and sound. I was wondering if you might have a few minutes to meet with me when you pick him up today." There was silence on the other end, then rapid Spanish, then, "I'm sorry, did you say Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player?" "Yes, ma'am. I met Marcus this afternoon, and I'd very much like to speak with you if that's possible." Is Is Marcus in trouble? Did he do something wrong? No, ma'am. Quite the opposite. Your son is an extraordinary young man, and I'd like to discuss his future with you if you're willing. After a moment's hesitation, she agreed to meet them at 6 p.m. as planned. Shaq spent the next hour and a half sitting with Marcus, talking about school, dreams, and life. He learned that Marcus had been teaching himself engineering concepts using library books and free online videos when he could access Wi-Fi. The boy's hunger for knowledge was extraordinary. You know what? Shaq said, pulling out his phone again. I want to introduce you to someone. He made a call, and when someone answered, he said, Hey, it's Shaq. I'm here with a young man who wants to be an engineer, and I think you two should meet. After a brief conversation, he handed the phone to Marcus. There's someone who wants to talk to you. Hello? Marcus said uncertainly. Hi, Marcus. My name is Dr. Jennifer Martinez, and I'm a structural engineer here in Atlanta. Shaq tells me you're interested in building bridges and buildings. Marcus's eyes lit up as he began talking to Dr. Martinez about engineering, asking questions that impressed both her and Shaq with their sophistication. They talked for nearly 20 minutes, with Dr. Martinez eventually inviting Marcus to visit her office and see some of her current projects. When 6 p.m. arrived, a small, tired-looking woman approached them cautiously. She was clearly exhausted from a long day of work, but her eyes were sharp and protective as she assessed the situation. Mrs. Rodriguez? Shaq stood up, his full height initially intimidating until he smiled and extended his hand. I'm Shaq. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Maria Rodriguez was tiny next to Shaq, but her handshake was firm. Her eyes immediately went to Marcus, taking in his new appearance with shock. Marcus, what? Where did you get these clothes? These shoes? Mom, Mr. Shaq bought them for me. And look. Marcus stood and walked around, showing off his new basketball shoes. They fit perfect. Maria's eyes filled with tears, part gratitude, part embarrassment, part overwhelming emotion. Sir, I cannot accept this. It's too much. We cannot pay you back. Mrs. Rodriguez, Shaq said gently, I don't want you to pay me back, but I do want to talk to you about Marcus's future. He explained about Marcus's intelligence, his dreams of becoming an engineer, and the conversation with Dr. Martinez. He talked about the boy's maturity and resilience, and how impressed he was with the young man she was raising. Your son is special, Mrs. Rodriguez, and I'd like to help make sure he has every opportunity to reach his potential. What Shaq proposed next surprised everyone. He wanted to set up an education fund for Marcus, not just for college, but for enrichment programs, tutoring, and educational opportunities starting immediately. He'd already spoken with Dr. Martinez about creating a mentorship program for Marcus with local engineers. But why? Maria asked, echoing her son's earlier question. Why would you do this for us? Shaq looked at Marcus, then back at his mother. Because I was raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs to take care of her children. Because I know what it means to have someone believe in you when you're young. And because Marcus has something special. Not just intelligence, but character. The way he protects you from worry. The way he dreams big despite his circumstances. The way he carries himself with dignity even when he has nothing. That's not something you can teach. That's something you're born with. He paused, then continued. I can't change the world for every child, but I can change the world for one child. And sometimes, that one child grows up to change the world for many others. As the weeks that followed would prove, Shaq's instincts were correct. Marcus threw himself into his educational opportunities with the passion of someone who understood their value. Dr. Martinez became not just a mentor but a family friend, introducing Marcus to other engineers and taking him to construction sites to see real-world applications of the concepts he was learning. The story of their meeting spread through social media and news outlets, inspiring others to pay attention to the children in their own communities who might be struggling in silence. The Foot Locker where they'd shopped established a permanent program to provide shoes and clothes for children in need. But perhaps the most significant change was in Marcus himself. The confidence that had begun with a simple pair of shoes grew into academic achievement, leadership in school, and a clear vision for his future. Teachers noticed the transformation. Classmates stopped their teasing, and Marcus began to see himself the way Shaq had seen him from the very beginning, as someone with unlimited potential. 6 months later, Shaq received a handwritten letter. "Dear Mr. Shaq, I wanted to tell you that I got all A's on my report card, and I'm in advanced math now. Dr. Martinez took me to see a bridge being built, and I understood how it worked. My mom cries happy tears sometimes when she looks at my shoes, but I told her they're not just shoes. They're a reminder that someone believed in me. I'm going to be an engineer, just like I told you. And someday, I'm going to help other kids like you helped me. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else just walked by. Your friend, Marcus P.S. My mom wants to invite you for dinner sometime. She makes the best tamales in Atlanta." Shaq kept that letter in his office, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply notice someone who needs to be seen. The story of Marcus and the shoes became part of Shaq's legacy, not just as a basketball player or businessman, but as someone who understood that true greatness is measured not by what you achieve for yourself, but by what you inspire in others. And in classrooms across Atlanta, a young boy named Marcus continued to dream of building bridges, both the kind made of steel and concrete, and the kind made of hope and human connection.